Good afternoon, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. Thank you so much for joining as we are about to discuss a very important topical matter. And this afternoon, let's talk about why the PNP will win the next general election according to the experts. Not according to me, but according to the experts, it seems to me that the PNP they're suggesting will win the next general elections. Now, we've been hearing that from the polls, particularly from the PNP's polls, the Don Anderson polls, that the PNP is geared to winning the next election, the next general election of Jamaica. Now, that is something very interesting because in recent times, Mr. What's his name now? Mark Golding has been suggesting that he's not going to divulge, he's not going to present his policy platforms, his policy agendas, as he thinks that those policies might be appropriated by the GLP and that they will run with whatever ideas he has crafted, he and his colleagues have crafted. Now, I told you that that is stupidity and that the PNP needs to stand up to the game and also needs to accept responsibility that a part of the democratic process is to present your policy plans, your policy agendas, what you have planned for the people were you to gain the victory in the next general election. Now, we do not understand why Mark Golding is of that opinion. It's either he's telling the truth, which I don't believe he's telling the truth, or he's bereft of any ideas apart from what Andrew Holness is doing. Now, Mr. Mark Golding, you cannot continue to criticize the GLP leader, Andrew Holness, for what he's doing or for what he's not doing if you have not presented any credible, viable option to what he is doing. You've got to say, then, you don't have to divulge everything, but you are going to give us some ideas as to what you are going to do if you are to win or if you gain if you are the next Prime Minister of Jamaica, if you become the next Prime Minister of Jamaica. Now, that is what we are suggesting that you do. But it seems to me that you are obstinate and you've decided that you are going to go ahead with presenting nothing. Now, that can be good in one sense that your diehards, the PNP diehards, might believe what you're telling them. They might be hoodwinked, gaslit into what you're saying. But at the same time, you might lose a great number of voters. You're playing here a political game and you need to play your cards well, Mr. Golding. I think you need to sit down and you need to think about what you stated. It suggested that you don't respect the Jamaican populace or electorate because if you do, then you are going to present policy agendas. One of the reasons the Democrats lost the election last year, even though whether Democrats or the Republicans or PNP or GLP, it's the same. We're just talking about here a sports game because politics is really now a sports game, a sports match that you watch, a basketball game. It has nothing to do with anything. It has nothing to do with the intellect. It has nothing to do with how they are going to improve the lives of the citizens, right? But that is what people enjoy doing. And perhaps I do enjoy talking about politics. So let me just say what I'm saying. Maybe that's what I like to do one of the things I like to do in my spare time, to analyze what is happening in the political realm, because a lot of times I like also to merge my political ideas to see how prophetic interpretations of the Bible are being fulfilled. So that is something that I like to do, and I present these things to you. I've not gone deep yet because I'm not sure that you are going to understand the profundity of my thoughts should I be able to go deep. But let us stay superficially speaking, because that is what politics is, often superficial, right? And so if the PNP were to win the next general election, what would Mark Golding do that is different from what the GLP is doing? Will he stop the IMF? Will he begin to lobby the IMF for a more softer, I should say, less stringent, less rigid policy plans for the country? I would like to know that, because we are saying now that we have to move down to 60% of GDP. And my question is why? Why do we have to move down to that level when the country is undeveloped and underdeveloped? Why can't we stop now and begin to develop and then try to pay off our debts, try to not exceed and go beyond 100% of GDP? But we will have some good hospitals, some good roads, develop our manufacturing capacity. But it seems to me very clearly that that is not the goal. The goal here is just to win based on neoliberal ideas. And that is not going to be good. I've already said to you that neoliberalism encompasses the fact that government spending will be reduced. That's one. The privatization of government services, as we're seeing in the United States. That's happening in the United States. And we've got to be careful of these government services being taken over by private entities, because when they do take these businesses over, or services, I should say, over, like hospitals, education, airports, then you are going to see that they're going to run them for profit. And then many people will not be able to access these services that we often take for granted. Note in the United States also that even education, public education, is about to be privatized under Trump. And don't believe the Democrats are going to rescind what he's doing. It will be business as usual with their spin, right? Business as usual with their spin on what Trump is actually doing, because both parties believe in austerity. That's the game right now. But having said that, there is a trend now that I'm seeing in Jamaica and perhaps in the world. The United States also set that trend, where you're having foreign governments coming to the country to support a candidate for prime minister, for the role of premiership or for the presidency. In the case of the United States, Zelensky was the one who went on Kamala Harris's campaign, and he campaigned for Joseph Biden and supported their party and what they were doing in terms of winning the presidency last year. They, of course, lost, but I don't think that that's a very good trend that we are setting in the West in terms of having another president or prime minister coming to one's country to support a candidate for the election. That is not good for democracy. In fact, I call it election interference. As far as I am concerned, I would call that election interference. Of course, evidently, we all have our biases, and I'm sure that Zelensky wanted, the Democratic Party to have won, but you have to do that silently. You cannot go publicly and declare, especially as someone who occupies that very high seat in government, as Zelensky does. And he supported Kamala Harris and went publicly on her campaign supporting her presidency last year. That, to me, is despicable. And that is what J.D. Vance actually challenged him on. That, to me, is election interference. Can you imagine if Putin was to have gone and supported Trump publicly? Wow, the entire country would have, yes, that Trump is a puppet of Putin. But you're going to say that Putin is a much more powerful man, and he sits atop of nuclear weapons. And yes, he does. While Zelensky's country, Ukraine, is not that powerful. And yes, it's not. It's perhaps one of the most, if not the most impoverished countries in Europe. However, it is still election interference, or not to be. What I'm seeing in Jamaica right now, let's go back to the grounds of Jamaica, that comrade, what's his name again, from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, he was on, I forgot his name, Dr. Gonzalez, right? Dr. Gonzalez is seen, or was seen yesterday, at this great or big PNP rally in which he was supporting the candidacy of Mark Oding. Now, that trend is not good. It is not a good example that we're setting in our politics. Dr. Gonzalez, already people were, and I think he addressed that, already people were suggesting, why did you entertain the likes of Vybz Kartel after he had been released from prison. And, he addressed that yesterday that, God wants us to be humble and to help those who we can and to show mercy to the merciless and all of that stuff. Now, the fact of the matter is, yes, he wants to do that, but we know that all what you were playing was politics. And we know who Vybz Kartel is and the influence that he has. Are you taking the ordinary Jamaican off the streets and bringing them to your house? Would you have done that? The ones who don't have any money. Those are the ones now that Christ wants us to show mercy to, not the likes of Vybz Kartel, who has had a lot of opportunities, and he was the one who made the wrong choice and bad choices upon another. And I'm not suggesting here that God doesn't forgive. God forgives, and he's merciful, and, he even encourages us to forgive 70 times 7. So God is abundant in mercy, and he's tender-hearted, and he practices. He's not a biased God. We are all equal in his sight. But it's the way in which it was done, in the same way that you're supporting the PNP party. God is not a God who is involved in politics, in human politics. He sets up, but he does not dictate. If they're going too far, he will intervene. Right? Because we know that the kingdoms of this world and the kingdom belong unto the devil until God is going to destroy the entire world here and set up his kingdom. So all of these prime ministers and presidents are controlled by the devil. And except if they have surrendered, and I'm not sure of one who has surrendered, but maybe there is someone out there who has surrendered their government to the rule of God. And that is why we're having all these wars. And they're restless. And they are very, what should I say now, extremely envious of each other and wanting to take each other's natural resources and what they don't want. But I thought that was a very sad precedent. Let me show you a video here of Dr. Gonzalez on the supporting the PNP. And let me see what he's saying on the campaign trail.
From my mouth. Time come. Time come. Time come. To the PNP.
Yeah, we can stop there because they're going to give me copyright. I can't play those music on YouTube, right? It's going to be copyrighted. But he's suggesting that it's time come, and it's time to vote for Comrade Demar voting. Now, that is not a very good precedence that we're setting in Jamaica, and I think that we should call that out. Whether it's Andrew Holness, somebody coming from abroad to support Andrew Holness, a practicing politician, I don't think that is good. If he was a normal civilian, of course, but I don't like to see the fact that we're having other, prime ministers coming to Jamaica to support a particular candidate. I don't think that that is a good precedence, and I would call that election interference, because Dr. Gonzalez, as far as I know, is still the prime minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Now, Professor Charles, this morning in the Gleaner, is suggesting that Professor Charles is a professor at the University of the West Indies. Yes, he is there at the university, Dr. Christopher Charles. Although Jamaica's two main political parties are already claiming victory ahead of their upcoming general election, Dr. Christopher Charles believes that the People's National Party, the PNP, will defeat the governing Jamaica Labour Party, JLP, at the national polls. It will be a close election, he's saying here, but the PNP since last year has been constantly ahead of the JLP by several percentage points outside the margin of error. I expect the PNP to win the next general election, the professor of political and social psychology at the University of the West Indies, UWI Mona, told the Gleaner yesterday. Now, we must understand the context that Professor Charles is coming from the University of the West Indies, and they normally are PNP. So, and a lot of the polls are biased. Do people even believe in polls anymore? I don't, but if you do, then, good luck to you, right? And I wish you well. But many of these polls are often tainted and they are biased. And that is what they present to you. So you have to be very careful of what you hear from the polls. I'm not suggesting that he's right, neither am I suggesting that he's wrong, right? It is depending on what you're seeing and your assessment. Charles was referencing public opinion polls conducted over the last year. Speaking on TVJ's program All Angles last Wednesday, the General Secretaries of the PNP and the GLP each expressed confidence that their party will be given the mandate to govern Jamaica for the next 5 years in the upcoming general election due by September. Now, I was shocked to hear that Dr. Horace Chang is the GLP's General Secretary. Now, that to me is interesting. I know that he is a Minister of National Security, or some people say national insecurity, but that is what he is. But how could they choose Dr. Horace Chang, who doesn't even have a lot of vibes, right? He's not vibesy. Is he vibesy? Does he have a lot of, connection with the public to be the General Secretary of the JLP? I thought that was a very poor choice to have selected Dr. Horace Chang, but I could be wrong. Maybe he does have a lot of vibes. The JLP's General Secretary, Dr. Horace Chang, which I was very, very surprised that he was or is the General Secretary, predicted that his party will win the election with at least 35 seats comfortably, while the PNP's General Secretary, Dr. Dayton Campbell, declared, "We think we will win this election and we think we will get at least 38 to 39 seats." In the last general election in 2020, the JLP won 49 of the 63 seats, leaving the PNP with only 14. However, Professor Charles pointed to the 2007 and 2016 general elections, noting that not only were they close, but they were won by the party in opposition. So he's speculating based on that. In 2007 polls, or into the 2007 polls, the JLP defeated the PNP 33 to 27. In the 2011 polls, the PNP took back the reins, winning 42 seats to the JLP's 21. But in 2016, the PNP was once again narrowly defeated by the JLP, this time by a single seat, 32 to 31. The incumbent government has more work to do with the electorate, Charles pointed out. But I think that the PNP has a lot of work to do. What are they doing? If Professor Charles is suggesting that the government, who is the sitting government, so what does he have to do? They're doing what they're doing. What work does he have to do? He's doing what he's doing. He's all around the country. I see Andrew Holness, Dr. Andrew Holness, all around the country. He's on TikTok, he's on Facebook, and he's having everything that he's participating in is on all the lives. So he has a TikTok live, and every day you can see him actively engaged in ceremonies and also with the people. He dialogues with them, he talks with them, he visits the projects that his government officials are working on. So I don't know if Dr. Andrew Holness can do more. Maybe, yes, he can do more in terms of telling us how he's going to deal with the matters that concern Jamaicans the most in terms of crime and violence. And I understand that he has bought a lot of vehicles and the police are on the road. Lots of police are on the road, I understand, manning the roads, and people feel a sense of security. I'm not sure if that's false, but at least they feel a sense of security as they see a lot of policemen on the roads, policemen and women. Let's not forget our women who are also actively engaged in the police force. Shout out to our women who risk their lives to keep Jamaicans secured and safe. Also, so I don't think Dr. Charles, Professor Charles, I'm not sure. I think you would have to explain better when you mean that. What do you mean that the GLP has to do more work to do? This is a government and it's doing what it is doing. And it's working on a number of projects, I understand, including the SWAP program and the building of and refurbishing of hospitals and other projects that he has spoken about. So my thing is that the PNP needs to do more work. Apart from dancing and, everywhere that Mark Gordon goes, he's dancing and talking all stuff nonsense about not, you know, disclosing his policy platform because he thinks that the incumbent government might appropriate his ideas. I think that was nonsense, Mark Gordon. That was absolute nonsense. And it shows that you do not respect the Jamaican electorate. It shows that you do not respect the Jamaican electorate. And I'm sure that you might feel it at the polls. You might feel it at the election day, on election day, that people think that you were hoity-toity and you do not respect their intelligence. You cannot play that politics, that type of politics, Mr. Golding. You've got to stand up and do what you need to do. So if anybody were to work, I think, and show the people what they're doing, it will be the PNP. And I'm not pro Andrew Holness, as you would know. I'm just telling you the truth that I'm not sure what Professor Charles is talking about. Looking at the results of the recent RGR Gleaner Communications Group commissioned public opinion poll by Don Anderson's Market Research Services Limited, the professor quizzed if they have done as well in government as they say they have, why are they behind the opposition party in Don Anderson polls? But shouldn't Professor Charles understand that the poll, Don Anderson's poll, is PNP? Just like the other polls coming from nationwide is GLP. So I don't trust any of them. So I would not ask this question, Professor Charles. I think that you should be more intelligent to know that that is the political climate, the political environment in which Jamaica functions. You should know that. So I would not ask a question because it is a biased poll. Both polls are biased, the one from the GLP and the one from the PNP. In the survey conducted between January 30th and February 12th of this year, 1,201 registered voters aged 18, and it's such a small sample. They come up with these small samples, 1,200. Yeah, that's not a big sample, please. 1,201 registered voters aged 18 and over from across all parishes were asked, which party would you vote for if elections were called today? Of those polled, 35.4, I should say, percent said the PNP. So of the 1,201 registered voters who were polled, aged 18 and over, 35.4% said that they would vote for the PNP, while 30.7% said that they would vote for the GLP, leaving a gap of 4.7%. But that is a very minute sample. I think you'd want at least 10,000, right? I would say the larger the sample, I would say perhaps 30,000 or 50,000. Go there, go high enough and work. If you guys want to show us what's happening, choose to have a big sample so we can, and even so, you still can't tell, but at least it gives you a better pulse of what is happening on the grounds. Oftentimes, it's not what is happening on the grounds that people are looking at. And they select maybe a PNP area. And if you go into a PNP area, definitely you're going to have that sort of polling where people are more, inclined towards voting for the PNP. If you go into a GLP, a larger GLP area, then the same thing, right? So I don't understand when they tell us that this is going to be, I find that our way of doing research in Jamaica is limited. And I'm not sure because we do not have an educated populace that we actually do these things and make our research simple. And then people take these as gospel. People are going to read this from the Gleaner and say, oh, wow, 35, the PNP is ahead in the polls, 35 point whatever, 4% ahead of the GLP, and that is not true. It represents a sample, and the sample, as I'm suggesting, could be biased because the research could have been done in largely a PNP constituency. That is what we have to look at. So I'm not sure. Let me see here if the research was, if they had disclosed, who they actually, where they actually did the sampling. I don't see that. Maybe they did, but I'm not seeing that. Right? I'm not seeing that. Now, let us look at what Gordon, who is a lecturer in the Department of Government at the University of the West Indies, Mona, pointed out that although public perception of the government may not be very positive, it does not necessarily translate to support for the opposition. And that is true. That's a very good point that Gordon is making, right? So the PNP needs to present itself as a credible alternative to the government. It needs to be able to articulate a set of ideas and policies and alternatives that are viable, clear, specific, and measurable. He pointed out they have to do that. The challenge that voters face is deciding whether we should stick with a government that we know or what we don't think has done an awful job, or take the risk of electing a new government. And that is what the Jamaican is will come down to. I think that he is spot on, that that is going to be what will drive Jamaicans to vote for any of the parties, right? Should we stick to the government that we know and that we don't think has done an awful job, or do we take the risk of electing a new government? I think that is going to be the deciding factor in the next general election. Gordon added that the PNP will also have to put focus on engaging both local and diasporic stakeholders if they want to convince the electorate that they are prepared for governance. The importance of visibility, voice, and ideas must not be understated. He said as Jamaica prepares rather to head to the polls within the next 6 months. So I don't know, but it seems to me that the PNP is weak and that they do not have any viable option. They do not have any viable policies that they would implement were they to win the next general election. I don't think that they have any fresh and new ideas. As a result of that, they're just not saying much. It's all about dancing. It's all about attacking Andrew Holnes's policies and what he's doing, and trying to cast a lot of, what should I say now, distrust, trying to rev up distrust regarding the performance of his government, that the Andrew Holnes's led government. But that cannot win election. That alone cannot win you an election. And Mark Golding has taken now Professor Gonzalez to, I didn't find Professor Gonzalez to be charismatic on the campaign. He said a few things that were not inspiring, right? Often sounded like a theologian to me, based on what he said last night. So almost like he was preaching to the Jamaican audience. It wasn't very inspirational, to say the least. And I'm wondering now if the last person that they're going to call on is Mia Mottley, the Prime Minister of Barbados. I think that's what they're going to call on her. And if they call on her, I think that, and maybe the PNP is going to call on her just before the election. I think that Mark Golding, because, Mia Mottley, I think her sister-in-law, yeah, she has a sister-in-law in Jamaica. Her brother rather, Mia Mottley's brother, is married to one of the Duncans, what's his name? The Duncan's daughters. Forgot her name. But anyway, I think that they will call her, that's Mia Mottley, to Jamaica to sort of develop and to inspire Jamaicans to vote for Comrade Mark Golding. And I think that that could give them, along with Vybz Kartel, especially if they have on the platform, Mia Mottley and Vybz Kartel. I don't know if Mia Mottley is going to share the stage with Vybz Kartel, but maybe she will. Maybe she will. And if you have Vybz Kartel and Mia Mottley at the same arena and at the stage at the same time, that could give the PNP a huge boost. Yes, it can. And I noted that not professor, but Dr. Gonzalez spoke a lot about Vybz Kartel yesterday in his speech. So I'm not sure if he's also planting the seeds for Vybz Kartel's future role in the PNP as a member of parliament and possibly the next prime minister of Jamaica. Anything goes, anything happens in Jamaica because we're a ghetto country and we love the ghettoism. We love the ghetto show, right? That is what we're all about. And I really wonder the Dr. Gonzalez and the Mia Motleys as they visit Jamaica, what do they think about us in terms of, but maybe not much is happening in their country too. And if they're willing to share the stage with the likes of Vybz Kartel, you understand what is in their minds. Right? You understand what is in their minds. But we must say, give Andrew Holness his credit so far. He has been running a decent campaign. I can't really hit him for that. I must give him his props. I must give Dr. Andrew Michael Holness his props that I have not seen him, on the stage with the likes of the Trudeaus. And I think he can call, and, right now with the Prime Minister of Canada has been replaced. They have just voted in a new prime minister to be Prime Minister of Canada. So Trudeau will no longer be the prime minister and the party leader of his party, of the Labour Party. Is it the Labour Party that he's prime minister of? So I think he and Andrew Holness share a very good relationship. So maybe Trudeau will be on the, I don't think Trudeau is going to be able to rev up any great amount of, vibes among the Jamaican people. Maybe, I don't think so. So I think Mia Motley has a much better stake. She is much more, I wouldn't say she's much more of a global person than Trudeau, but she has much more charisma in that sense. I think that she's well known around the world in terms of her defense, or so-called defense of human rights, particularly climate change. So I think that if they should put her on the stage with Vybz Kartel to support the candidacy of Mark Golding, I think the PNP stands a good chance of winning the next general election. Remember now that it's not about winning for substance or based on substance, it's winning based on who can rev up the most vibes, whether it's the Republican Party or the Democratic Party or the JLP or the PNP. That's what it's about, right? It's not about the people. It's about the elites, the ruling class, and who they want to win, right? So you always have to keep that in mind. But I thought I would share these, few ideas with you. And what do you think? Let me know. Do you think it was a good idea for Professor Gonzalez, the professor, prime minister? He perhaps was a professor before, but Prime Minister Dr. Gonzalez. Do you think that that was a good idea for him to have been on the stage with Comrade Mark Golding and supporting his candidacy for the next election and using his mantra, time come? Now, it would have been different, before I end, it would have been different if Gonzalez was there to give a lecture on the history of the PNP and how the PNP has stood for workers' rights and unions and all of that stuff. I mean, I wouldn't have a problem with that because that would be a lecture. But what he was there specifically yesterday to do at that rally was to support the candidacy of Comrade Mark Golding. I can't agree with that. I think that that is election interference, and I think that we should speak out against it. It is not the decent thing to do, and I would say that to the face of Dr. Gonzalez. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you'd like, share, and subscribe. Remember to like the videos and to leave a comment so that the algorithms, or the algorithm, I should say, the YouTube algorithm, which is really a phony algorithm, will push the videos along. Thank you so much for joining.